No, I don't prepare for essay exams.
Just walk into class with an open mind and hope for the best.
No, not at all.
I usually just get in and sit down, find out what the subject's about, and I wing it from there.
No, I never study for essays.
I have very little time to prepare. I have children.
Just walk in and write whatever's off the top of my head.
Over and over again, students are taught to organize their thoughts and devise a thesis before writing a paper. But when it comes to writing an essay for an exam, students often forget to apply these same principles. Sound familiar? For one thing, time pressures may make you feel you can't take the time to outline your ideas as you would with a paper you're writing at home. But the fact is, organizing your argument before you write can actually save you time and improve your effort.
Be sure that you ask me. Take a couple of minutes, look at the questions, think about what it is you want to write before you begin to write. Most of all, remember the essay's format.
In an essay exam, you are usually required to recall information, present that information in a logical, orderly manner, and draw conclusions based on that information. The process isn't much different from writing an essay or research paper, except you have a limited amount of time, perhaps an hour, in which to complete the task. Your preparation for the essay exam, in terms of research and information gathering, is done before you ever go into the examination room. Ideally, such preparation should begin the first day of class with thorough note-taking. Throughout the course, you will need to take notes on your reading assignments as well, to be sure you understand the overall content of the subject as well as its subparts. Good note-taking can help you anticipate the instructor's expectations. As you study your notes before an exam, look first at the overall content of the course. What's been emphasized? What topics recur? You can even write out a list of possible exam questions you might be asked. Obviously, last-minute cramming is not very helpful in preparing for an essay exam. Your answers cannot be short 3- or 4-word phrases. In an essay exam, you're asked to expand on information, and your ability to do this depends on how well you understand the concepts, rather than how well you remember facts. Rather than merely rereading the notes you took throughout the term, you might try writing a detailed outline of the course based on your notes. Writing the information in a sentence outline will help you remember the information and help you to see whether there are any areas you don't understand. Shortly before the exam, review your outline, since it's a quick synopsis of the information in the course. Some people also find it helpful to warm up just before any essay exam by writing for 10 to 15 minutes on a subject which is key to the course. When you are handed the exam, be sure to study the test as a whole first, before starting to answer any questions. Does the exam give you the flexibility to choose 2 out of 3 essay questions, or must you answer them all? Read through everything to decide which questions will require more time to answer and which will not be as time-consuming. Your decision to devote more or less time to a given question should not only depend on how well you know the answers, but also on how many points are allotted to each question. On a 100-point exam, for example, a 30-point question should be allotted 1/3 of your time because it is worth 1/3 of your grade. Before you get started, decide how much time you'll devote to each question. Rough out a timeline and stick to it throughout the time allotted. And be sure to allow yourself time at the very end to reread your essays. Make sure you understand what you're being asked to do, because every strategy term has a slightly different meaning. Defining the runaway problem in America will produce a different essay from analyzing the runaway situation. Be sure you answer the question asked. You may write an excellent essay on the moral dilemmas of taking a patient off of a life support system, for example. But if the question asked you to analyze the various alternatives to taking a patient off life-sustaining equipment, then you have misread the question. No matter how good your argument is or how effective your writing, if you don't answer what's been asked, your answer won't be accepted. In order to better understand what's being asked of you in an essay question, you first need to understand how essay exam questions are written. There are two basic terms commonly used in the wording of a classic essay exam question. The first is called a strategy term. It tells you how to approach the task of writing, such as define, discuss, analyze, compare, or contrast. When you define something, you mark its limits or determine its essential qualities and characteristics. So, to define the runaway problem in America, we might state how big the problem is, who runs away, and why they run away. For example,
more than 1 million children in America run away from home each year. These children come from all sorts of homes and backgrounds, from upper middle class to poverty-level housing projects. The problem crosses all income and racial barriers. Experts say the problem is reaching epidemic proportions.
this essay might go on to define the various kinds of runaways, such as throwaway children, children who have been kicked out of their homes. Or the essay might define not only the term runaway, but also why or how runaways are a problem. For example, teenage runaways account for a large percentage of crime in our cities, including stealing to support drug habits, dealing drugs, and prostitution. Whatever approach you take, you should always be guided by the strategy term in the questions, in this case, define. For an essay question which asks you to analyze the problem, you will take a slightly different approach. First, divide the topic into categories and then look at each aspect one at a time. To analyze the runaway problem, you could divide it first into the following categories. 1, the size and extent of the problem. 2, what happens to teenagers when they live on the streets, such as turning to prostitution and drugs. 3, the problems social agencies face in trying to keep kids off the street. 4, what's needed to solve the problem. As you can see, an essay which touches on these main categories is different from one which defines the runaway problem. However, there may be some overlap. Notice that both essays discussed how extensive the runaway problem is, and both mentioned the crimes that runaways may commit. But there were differences as well. When you define a problem, you do not need to examine solutions or courses of action. When you analyze a problem, however, you're being asked to take apart the components in order to examine it. Therefore, you will need to discuss issues like possible solutions or barriers to success. Define and analyze are not the only two strategy terms you may be given in an essay exam. Here's a list of commonly used strategy terms and their meanings. Compare and/or contrast means to demonstrate the similarities or differences between two or more events or topics. For example, you may be asked to compare the portrayal of the South in Gone with the Wind to that in The Red Badge of Courage. The term describe asks you to detail an event, person, or process in a way which creates a clear and vivid image. For example, describe the procedure for performing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, or describe the protagonist in Gone with the Wind. You would go into great detail describing Scarlett O'Hara, perhaps describing her physical appearance, her relationships, how she changed. Evaluate is a strategy term which asks the writer to make a judgment about the value or significance of a topic, such as evaluate the contribution of black 20th century writers on modern literature. You would, of course, include the names of some of those writers, such as James Weldon Johnson, Langston Hughes, and Count E. Cullen, and look at the effect some of their writings have had on modern life. If you are asked to explain something, your task is to clarify a topic. Make it more understandable by using examples or reasons for how it works or why it exists. For example, explain why teenage suicide rates have increased in recent years. Or you may be asked to summarize a topic. In this type of essay, you would outline the major points in a short but thorough manner. Summarize the possible psychological effects of abortion. Again, always be sure you're answering the question that is asked. Do not waste your time discussing protest strategies, such as marches and demonstrations. You may know a lot about it, but this is a digression. The question asked you merely to summarize the reasons for their opposition, so you would need to discuss the movement's beliefs, but not its strategies. To keep yourself on target, refer back to the question often as you write. It may be tempting to stray from the original question, especially if you've prepared answers to questions not asked. If you're asked to compare X and Y, don't throw in Z for good measure. The person grading your exam will not be impressed. The second component of an essay exam question is the content of the essay. Discuss the function of the river in Heart of Darkness. The topic of the essay, then, is the function of the river in the heart of darkness. Again, if that is your topic, stick to it. Do not recount the plot. Do not discuss various characters. Discuss only the function of the river in that book. After you have thoroughly read the question and are sure you understand what you're being asked to do, avoid the temptation to begin writing at once. Although you may feel the press of time, you will sacrifice the organization and quality of your essay if you do not take a few moments to plan it out. Allot about 10% of the time you have set aside for each question to sketch out an outline. If you know you have 20 minutes for this essay, spend the first 2 minutes jotting down the main and supporting points you want to bring out. The exam asks you to identify the primary symbolic functions of Hester Prynne's daughter, Pearl, in the Scarlet Letter. The approach you're asked to take is to identify the key symbolic functions. Therefore, you start with a list. You can think of 3 ways in which Pearl serves as a symbol. She symbolizes the illicit love between Hester and Dimmesdale. She symbolizes Hester's sin, and for Dimmesdale, she stands as a symbolic conscience of the act he committed and won't admit to. Once you have your main points, you then need to rough in examples to support each one. Under the first point, Pearl as the symbol of illicit love, note any scenes which might illustrate this point. For example, you may recall the scene in which all 3 characters are holding hands on the scaffold, and Pearl is the link between Hester and Dimmesdale.
The crowd was in a tumult. They beheld the minister, leaning on Hester's shoulder and supported by her arm around him, approach the scaffold and ascend its steps. Partly supported by Hester Prynne and holding one hand of little Pearl's, the Reverend Mr. Dimmesdale turned to the dignified and venerable rulers.
Then go on to identify supporting examples for the other symbolic themes connected with Pearl. To show how Pearl represents Hester's sin, you could use the scene where Pearl mimics Hester by fashioning an A out of seaweed for herself, or include the incident where Hester refuses to hold Pearl in front of the A, noting that one token of her shame can't hide another. Pearl's function as Dimmesdale's conscience can be illustrated in the central scaffold scene, when she insists that he publicly confess.
"Pearl? Little Pearl," cried he after a moment's pause. Then, suppressing his voice, "Hester, Hester Prynne, are you there?" "Yes, it is Hester Prynne," she replied in a tone of surprise. "Come up hither, Hester, thou and little Pearl," said the Reverend Mr. Dimmesdale. "Ye have both been here before, but I was not with you. Come up hither once again, and we will stand all 3 together." She silently ascended the steps and stood on the platform, holding little Pearl by the hand. The minister felt for the child's other hand and took it. The 3 formed an electric chain. "Minister," whispered little Pearl, "wilt thou stand here with Mother and me tomorrow noontide?"
Once you have an outline, you need to quickly rough out your thesis. In most writing, you begin by writing your thesis first. However, in the pressured situation of an exam, you may find it easier to start with an outline and then develop the thesis from the outline. Using the previous example, we could write the following thesis. In the Scarlet Letter, the character of Pearl functions on at least 3 symbolic levels. Now you are ready to begin writing your essay answer. Here are some things to keep in mind when writing your essay. Be sure your thesis is clearly announced and the structure is clearly established from the onset. Unlike a longer paper you might write at home, the brevity of the essay exam forces you to be direct and to the point, with little time for creative writing. Be explicit and avoid being subtle on an essay exam. Remember, this is not a poem or a piece of fiction in which the reader must interpret your meaning. In an essay exam, the content is being graded, not your writing style. If you don't say what you mean, the person grading your paper may be in a hurry and may miss your point altogether. Even though you want to be direct, do not restate the question in your essay. This is a waste of time. Follow your outline as closely as possible. A rule of thumb is to turn each main heading in your outline into a paragraph. From our previous example where we had 3 key points, we could then write 3 paragraphs explaining each, as well as a brief introductory paragraph and concluding paragraph, for a total of 5 paragraphs. When moving from one paragraph to another, or from one main point to another, be sure to connect your ideas with clear transitions. Even just a short phrase can provide that bridge between one thought and another. For example, you might say, another way in which Perl functions as a symbol. Or, the third function of Perl is, be sure to make your main points clear, to delineate precisely what you're trying to say. Remember that an essay exam is often read and graded quickly. Avoid generalizations. An essay exam is a test of your knowledge. Demonstrate how much you know about the subject by using concrete examples. Avoid digressions. Although you want to demonstrate the depth of your knowledge, do not bring in extra information just to flex your intellectual muscles. If the information doesn't add to your thesis or answer the question at hand, all you will be showing the grader is how poorly you understood the question. Finally, write neatly and allow enough space to be able to make insertions or corrections when you reread the essay. Skip lines to allow room to make additions. Before you hand in your exam, be sure to allow some time at the end to revise and edit each answer. When you reread the essay, imagine you are the grader. Ask yourself the following questions. Does the thesis answer the question on the exam? Is the thesis clearly stated? Have all the major points been covered? Are the details specific? Is each sentence complete? Are the spelling and grammar correct? Is the writing legible and neat, even with crossouts and inserts? Even the best of writers cannot possibly produce a perfect essay in only one draft. Allow yourself enough time to review your work and revise it. It goes without saying that the more familiar you are with the subject, the more likely you will do well on the exam. However, in the case of an essay exam, knowing how to write under pressure can be as important as knowing the information you're writing about. It's a good idea to take the time to try to write a few sample essays so you can see if you are able to limit your writing to such a short form and small amount of time. Let's look at a sample essay written by a student and apply some of these principles we learned.
Describe a major influence in your life. It's difficult to select one single person in my life who has been a major influence. My parents, my minister, my teachers, and my friends have all played vital roles in my life. They have all helped shape my personality. There are probably others from my early childhood who have influenced my life, but who remain unremembered. There is one major influence from early childhood, however, that I do remember. Although he may not be the best example, the one figure who has been a major influence throughout my life is Santa Claus. Santa has been a major influence because of his hard work, his reliability, and his high moral values. The first impression I had of Santa Claus as a child was of a hard-working person. Charged with making and delivering toys to children throughout the world, Santa had to work year-round to accomplish this task. As far as I knew, he never complained, and he never took a day off. From Santa, I learned the importance of diligence, perseverance, and effort. I also remember being impressed with Santa's reliability. He not only gave his best effort, he was consistent with meeting his quotas and deadlines. He always arrived on time and on schedule. Santa's third and most dramatic impression on me has been in regards to children's behavior. He demanded only the best behavior, which included being polite, sharing, and helping out at home. I knew that if I didn't behave as expected, I would not be rewarded. I knew that he not only kept a list, but that he checked it twice. Knowing that Santa's watchful eye was on me, I was always striving to do my best. Well, almost always. Santa hasn't necessarily been the supreme influence in my life. I have to give some credit to my parents, but he has been significant. It can't be argued that he is the responsible figure for impressing upon me the importance of hard work, reliability, and good moral values.
Does the thesis answer the question on the exam?
The thesis statement, Santa has been a major influence because of his hard work, his reliability, and his high moral values, does address the question. Describe a major influence in your life.
Is the thesis clearly stated? Have all the major points been covered?
The thesis appears to be clearly stated, with the major points for paragraph development included.
Are the details specific?
Details and examples regarding the major points, hard work, reliability, and moral values have been included.
As with all forms of writing, the more you work at it, the better you'll be. Train yourself to read a question thoroughly, analyze what's being asked, and then get straight to the point. If you can do this, you're at least halfway there. The rest is up to you and how well you know your subject.
Evaluate the following essay exam strategies as either effective or not effective. In response to a question which uses the strategy term evaluate, you write down everything you remember regarding the topic. Not effective. Remember, when you evaluate, you judge the value or significance of something. Include only those items which will help make your point. Predicting several essay questions before the exam, you practice by preparing answers to them. This is an effective strategy. Practicing before the exam will help your preparation. Begin answering the first question you know, without wasting time reading the rest of the questions. Not effective. Remember to read through all of the questions first in order to get an overview of the exam and to plan for the use of your time. Spend 1/3 of your time writing an answer which counts for approximately 30% of the grade. Effective. Distribute your time according to the number of points allotted to each question. A 30-point question should take 1/3 of your time. A 50-point question should take half of your time. Devise a timeline for answering the questions on the exam. Effective. You should rough out a timeline for answering the questions and then stick to it throughout the exam. Spend your planning time writing out a thesis and then try to write an answer without an outline. Not effective. Even though you may feel pressed for time, you should organize your thoughts by sketching out an outline. Spend approximately 10% of the time allotted to the question to outlining before you write. To make your essay more interesting, include a lot of personal examples to liven up the writing. A lot of personal examples are not effective unless specifically requested. Once you have the main points in your outline, you should provide supporting examples which relate to the topic, not your personal life. Fill in subtopics on your outline because you still have 5 minutes left for planning according to your timeline. Effective. Once you have established your timeline, use it to its fullest advantage. Filling in the subtopics on your outline will help improve the quality of your answer. Since listing works better for you than outlining, stick to it when preparing to write your answers to an essay exam. Effective. Although listing is not recommended over outlining, in this case you stay with the original strategy. Do not change strategies once you have begun. In a compare and contrast question, you list and describe similarities between the two subjects. Not effective. For a compare and contrast question, you need to demonstrate similarities and differences between two subjects. By describing only the similarities, you are treating only half of the question. Leave a few minutes at the end of the testing period for revising and editing. Effective. Remember, even the best writers can't produce a perfect essay in one draft. Leave time to review your work and revise it.